Our final speaker, and last but not least, and Dr. Ariel Cohen. He's a senior fellow and managing director of Energy Growth and Security Program at ITIC. He's also a non-resident fellow at the Atlantic Council and author of many books and a columnist with Forbes magazine. Ariel will be speaking to us about the strategic environment in which all of this is taking place and the strategic environment in which we need to be able to operate. We need to be mindful of what we're getting ourselves into. Over to Ariel.
Thank you very much. Good morning. I want to thank my good friend, Dr. Kamran Bukhari, to thank Dan Witt for putting this together. Central Asia is one of the most underrated regions from the Washington perspective. I've been at this job one way or another since 1992. Like Dan, I went to Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan around 93. I witnessed firsthand the tremendous progress both countries have undertaken. And keep in mind, Uzbekistan had 3 different countries on its territory hundreds of years ago. Before, in the 19th century, the Russians came and smashed them and occupied them militarily. Kazakhstan had statehood in the last one was 17th century, and then squeezed between the Chinese Empire and the Russian Empire, they lost their statehood. And in 30 years, in one generation, as Dan said, 60% of youth who grew up, who were born after the independence. These countries are real countries. And I asked ChatGPT, if Central Asia was one country, what would it be like? And ChatGPT, in its wisdom, said, it would be like Thailand. It would be like South Africa. It would be the middle income country with 78 million people, and probably a candidate to G20. Think about it for a second. Geographically, yes, the drawback is being landlocked. Uzbekistan is double landlocked, but it's also in the heart of Eurasia. And there were people 120 years ago who wrote, he who controls the heart of Eurasia controls Eurasia. He who controls Eurasia controls the world island, blah, 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 blah. Really, it's the heart of Eastern Hemisphere. What does it mean for the US? It means that if these countries pursue their multi-vector policies that they're pursuing now for 30 years, President Tokayev, in his capacity as a foreign minister and prime minister, was a central architect of this multi-vector policy, together with the first president, Nazarbayev. Uzbekistan moved from more isolationist foreign policy to much more engagement, to currency convertibility, to investment. I do a lot of energy, including renewable energy at ITIC. Some of the largest and economically most effective projects into solar photovoltaic with the money from the Emirates and Saudi are in Uzbekistan. Why? It's a no-brainer. 300 days out of 365 days, it's bright sunshine. So the multi-vector policy, from our perspective, includes not beating these guys on the head when Kazakhstan is trading with one of its largest trade partners, Russia. Yes, Kazakhstan went out of its way to signal that they do not approve Russian aggression against Ukraine. President Tokayev was explicit. He said, we're not recognizing not just Crimea and Donbass, but also the 2 new territories that Russia claimed as theirs and is trying to annex, Zaporizhia and Kherson. Kazakhstan is meticulously observing the sanctions, and if individual players, actors, bad actors, are violating policy, those actors should be pursued, not the country. My colleagues talked a lot about the Jackson-Vanik amendment that denied PNTR, permanent normal trade relations, to countries that in 1974 did not allow Jewish immigration. Well, I'm a Jackson-Vanik baby. My family immigrated in 1976. I was 16 years old. This time has passed. I've been to Kazakhstan like then many, many times. I lost track. But I met with the chief rabbi, whose name is Cohen, by the way, and with others. And it's a thriving Jewish community there, as there is a thriving German community. Those Germans could go back to Germany. Korean, Ukrainian, Russian, you name it. But in the geopolitical context, when day after day, Russian bad actors get on national television, like Vyacheslav Nikonov, the grandson of his grandfather, Vyacheslav Molotov, and says Kazakhstan doesn't, have a claim to its northern territories. Or a really bad actor and a war criminal like Igor Girkin, Strelkov, says, Kazakhstan is next after Ukraine. What Kazakhstan is supposed to do? Of course, it'll talk to China and it'll talk to the United States and it'll talk to Europe, because these politicians in Russia are articulating a real present danger to Kazakhstan's territorial integrity. In terms of economics, it's extremely important. The Middle Corridor is an attempt to further develop the Belt and Road Initiative by China that Xi Jinping launched in Kazakhstan in 2013. But it didn't go real well. There's a lot of money that China spent that the economic return on investment is dubious, to say the least. So what is one of the solutions? One of the solutions is keep developing it, but because Russia is caught in a self-inflicted disaster, you route your roads, railroads, ferries, cyber optic cables from Kazakhstan and Turkmenistan to Azerbaijan and further to Georgia and Turkey. This is something we should look at as an economic opportunity. And speaking of China, on the 18th and 19th of May, so 2 days from now, in Xi'an, China, there's going to be a C5+1 Chinese style. The Chinese are very serious about it. Xi Jinping visits Central Asia regularly, so does Putin. Central Asian leaders recently, probably, as they say, holding their noses, went to Moscow and stood there with Putin on the podium for the Russian V-Day, May 9th. Again, these countries have a lot of interest there, including, in case of Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan, a lot of migrant workers who send remittances back home, Tajiks also. Secondly, Russia is controlling the main pipeline, the CPC pipeline, Caspian Petroleum Consortium, I think it's a Caspian Pipeline Consortium, from Kazakhstan to Novorossiysk. Russian equity partners are there. I don't know if Lukoil is still there or was replaced by Rosneft or something like that. But in any event, Russia got Kazakhstan by its throat. And as long as alternative oil pipelines and transportation routes are not developed across the Caspian through Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan needs to watch it, because it's something like 50% of Kazakh revenue. Kazakh-Azerbaijani connection is growing and expanding. Margarita, you said you saw the transportation infrastructure development on the Caspian. I would add to that the potential of Turkmenistan. In 2006, Lisa Curtis and I both worked for the Heritage Foundation. We published a paper on TAPI, Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India pipeline. This is one of these evergreen projects that I don't know if I'm going to see it in my lifetime. But if you take even a fraction of that gas that is designated for TAPI, so India, I think, fell off, but Pakistan is a huge market for gas. If they manage to do it, if they manage to deal with Taliban, which is a huge if, okay, fine, great. That would diversify gas sales for Turkmenistan, which now is in a monopsony situation with China. However, a little bit of that gas going to Azerbaijan across Caspian will add possibly, I don't know, 10 to 20 billion cubic meters for Europe. It'll be great for diversification. It'll be great for Turkmenistan. So yes, geography drives a lot of both foreign policy and investment agendas in this region, but it is, I think, from everything the ambassador, my colleagues here, and I cannot help but put a plug to our recently published report published by the Atlantic Council called Kazakhstan Could Lead Central Asia in Mitigating the World's Energy and Food Shortages, with my good friend Margarita Asinova and our colleague Wesley Hill. We published it, and you're welcome to look at it, download it, and comment on it. So the bottom line is we have, with the United States, have a geostrategic opportunity in Central Asia, and the businesses have an economic opportunity. Yes, China now is in the lead, but only because our shareholders, our boards are so anxious vis-a-vis the political risk. However, if you look at who invested in Kazakhstan back in the 90s, when the political risk was much higher, it was a brand new market. Exxon, Chevron, others, right? GM is there, GE is there, making electric locomotives, making cars. Now in the Uzbekistan, it's a Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, what, joint venture now with it, but it's GM cars, right? So middle income countries are great opportunities. Why? Because there's a lot of pent up demand. And I'm sure, and young population, I'm sure that these are future opportunities that should not be missed by our business and our administration. Thank you very much. Margarita is absolutely right. The Afghanistan war and now the Russian war in Ukraine are driving the agenda. And before Afghanistan war, before 2001, it was oil that was driving the agenda. I actually must say that in all my long engagement with the US policy towards the region under the Clinton administration, already the regional approach was formulated by Steve Sestanovich, who was the de facto assistant secretary of state for that region. And the regional approach was what's 30 years later is sort of coming to fruition, where Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan are driving the regional agenda. I must say the US tends to drop the ball in other very important areas. Wes and I write a lot about rare earths. These are absolutely vital minerals, metals, that are necessary for IT development, electric cars, energy transition. Where are those? A lot of them are in Africa. Who is eating our lunch in Africa and increasingly in Latin America? China. China is investing strategically both in mining of rare earth and in processing, refining of rare earth, controlling 60% of mining, 90% of refining, and where it's sourcing it from Africa, from Latin America, etc. So we are not capable as the superpower to walk and chew gum. Superpowers are superpowers because they can walk and chew gum. We need to multitask. We cannot just abandon our strategic agendas, especially when it comes to China. And when it comes to China, we're blue in the face about what? About Indo-Pacific, which is a construct, right? Indo-Pacific did not exist in just strategic studies until the current friction with China, but we created it. So from India to the Philippines, to Vietnam, Taiwan, and further Korea and Japan. Central Asia is a land reflection, is a land mirror image of Indo-Pacific, and we're not engaging. You should ask yourself why. I have my explanation, which is poor geography studies in American high school. I had 5 years of geography in Russian high school, and I managed to absorb some of it. You talk to an average American kid. I talked to my kids who went through pretty good schools here. No. So when kids like that get to the State Department and cannot read the map, that Central Asia is right there on the border of China and Russia, you get what you get. I know that we ran out of time, but just real quick, if we do allow, but if we facilitate the development of the middle corridor, it has a potential of creating friction between Russia and China, because whatever goes through middle corridor does not go through Russia. And Russia will not like it. Russia will complain to China. And I'm not sure this is such a bad idea from the US perspective.
Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to get more content like this.